Welcome to the Wonder With Me podcast, where I, Dr. Tonia Winchester, invite you to get curious with me about all things mind-body healing, especially how we can unlock the incredible healing power of our unconscious minds, so that we can all get out of stress mode and go back into healing mode. We'll talk about how you can easily create healthy, sustainable self-care habits so that you can calm your mind, sleep deeply, wake rested, and enjoy happy, energized days. Ultimately, so that you can make a bigger difference in your well-being and that of your family and the world around you. These casual chats are for educational purposes only and don't constitute a therapeutic relationship. With all that said, let's get this episode underway. Come wonder with me. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Wonder With Me podcast. This is episode 38, and it's all about grief today. I'm your hostess, Dr. and or Coach Tonia Winchester, and I will admit I am no expert in grief, but I think a lot about it, and I interact with a lot of people who have it, and we'll discuss a bit later in today's episode how I think that's true for everyone. So I'm just going to share some thoughts, some stories, some experiences, and possibly some new ways of looking at and moving through grief. So we might as well just get into it. Let's get wondering. I have a lot of things written down about what I want to say on this topic of grief. It feels right to just free flow with these ideas and sharings. I'm going to start with this idea that grief isn't really an emotion. It is a complex set of emotions that change and evolve over time. And really, that's how I see grief. Grief is this process of adaptation to life without the thing or the person that we've lost. Yes, grief just isn't about people who have passed away. It's about relationships that we've lost, dreams that never came to fruition and we had to let go of, objects, homes that we don't get to call our own anymore for whatever reason. In all of these examples, what we're doing is we're adapting to life without the thing that we used to have a really positive connection to. Now, interestingly, in Chinese medicine, which is part of my training as a naturopathic doctor, every emotion is processed by a specific organ system. So even though I have just provided a case for why grief is not an emotion, in Chinese medicine, the skin, the lungs, and the large intestine are all organs that help us to process grief. And it kind of makes sense if you really think about it and what these organs are doing. They're all about letting go. The large intestine, letting go waste materials from the body. The skin, we release sweat, minerals, toxins through our skin. And the lungs, we're breathing out carbon dioxide. I first became rather interested in grief and how it impacts our physiology after one of my very early patients who came to me with a skin condition that was covering a large majority of his body. I'll put a link to the original blog post that I wrote about this. And when I first did the new patient intake with him, I asked him if there was any stress going on in his life. And he kind of shrugged and made this gesture like he was pushing something away and said, I'm going through a divorce. No big deal. And that sparked my curiosity and it caught my attention because of what I know and learned in naturopathic college. And we worked primarily with food at first, finding food allergies, reactive foods, and we took those out of his diet and we introduced some herbal remedies and natural supplements. And his skin cleared up 60-70%. And there were still some patches of the skin irritation remaining. And I suggested that we do some acupuncture just to work on things from a different level. And he agreed. And I think it was his third session where I had him laying face down on the table. I was doing some acupuncture points on the back. And he started crying. He goes casually, I'm crying. And I said, yeah. Are you okay? And he said, yeah. And I said, are you okay if I step out and let this move through? And he said, yeah. So I left the room and the acupuncture needles did their work and he cried. After taking the needles out, he asked, so what do you think that was about? And I expressed my understanding about how the lungs, skin, large intestine process grief according to Chinese medicine ideas. and that the points that I was working on were some of the emotional access points of those organ systems on the back. And he's like, oh, that makes so much sense. And he went home and he called the next day and he started the phone conversation with, I don't know what you did to me, but, and in my mind I'm going, oh no, what have I done? First, do no harm. I don't want to hurt anyone. And he said, by the time I drove home across town, maybe 20 minutes, the rest of the rashes were gone. His system was having a hard time processing the grief of his divorce and was trying to use his skin as an exit route. And while yes, the food played a role, the remedies played a role, it wasn't until he had that emotional release that his skin was able to resolve. And this goes back to what I've talked about before, and I can definitely include a link to the graphic, but the formula for health in my mind is very simple. It's nutrients in and wastes out. We need nutrients in on all 4 levels: biochemical, physical, emotional, mental, and we need toxins and wastes out on all levels: biochemical, physical, emotional, mental. And so it's very common for me to ask patients when they're having any kind of skin, lung, or large intestine issue that if there's been any grief in the past little while, or any loss, right, that they may be grieving being a process. And I know that process fairly well over the last couple of years since my dad passed away. And most days are pretty good. There's been some intense periods of car crying and just sobbing into my husband's shoulders. But most of the time, things are okay. There's this lovely Instagram video based on the ideas of Dr. Lois Tonkin's model of grief, where it starts with a watercolor painting of a dark circle in the middle of the image. This doctor's theory is that things don't get better necessarily with time. Time doesn't heal all wounds. But over time, our life can expand and we can learn to live with the loss that we've experienced. And there can be ripple effects of how intense the emotions around these things are. And a girlfriend of mine who lost her dad several years before I did, she said to me, sometimes I'll just be in Canadian Tire and I'll just start sobbing. And recently, my father-in-law was celebrating a milestone birthday, and my husband and my brother-in-law were involved in preparing this big feast for all these guests that were going to be coming. My husband had to go early to get everything set up, and about midday I checked in and I said, hey, what time is the party? What time do I need to be there? I had been so resistant to going to this party and I didn't know why at the time. And he said, the party starts at 3. I was thinking about leaving at 3. It's about an hour away. I was trying to delay my arrival. And he said, I'd really like you to be here at 3. And my husband doesn't ask much of me. We have a very loving and supportive and independent relationship. He said, I'd really like you to be here at 3. And when I read that text, I just started bawling. And I didn't know why. And I took the dog for a walk and I cried and I got ready and I cried and I drove the hour and I cried the entire time. And it wasn't until I was about halfway on that drive that I realized what was going on. And frankly, I didn't want to be celebrating someone else's dad's birthday. Not even my in-laws, my family members. When I arrived, my brother-in-law was directing traffic, telling people where to park. So I pulled up and I rolled down the window. I had just composed myself about 2 blocks before. And he's like, hey, what's up, buddy? And I just start crying again. And I was like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be celebrating your dad's birthday when I can't celebrate my own dad's birthday in this same way. And of course, he said all the right things. Oh my gosh, you've been through such a hard thing. Blah, 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 blah. Gave me a big hug. I go into the party. I find my husband. I grab his hand. I was like, please come with me. So we go out into the driveway. I share the same thing. And he's like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that, honey. So sorry. Big hugs. Get some more cries out. And went in and did my best to enjoy the afternoon. That kind of came out of the blue. That wasn't something I expected or knew was there, but there was another layer of processing that needed to happen. Now, one of the tricky things I find with a lot of my patients and clients that I work with around these types of emotional processing experiences is that in these times of loss, we often hold on to, we remember the bad parts of the end, when the person was sick, or when the fighting was happening in the relationship, or the crisis that occurred that created the loss of the object, or the home or the dream. We focus on the end. That's really hard to move forward with, focusing on the end, because there's no movement there. It's over. And so sometimes when I'm working with patients, and certainly in my own healing journey, I'll do this type of personal healing work where we invite the person to create an abstract thought, visual model of all of the good things that they had with that person or that thing. And through an imagination-based exercise, implant those things into the future so that we can encounter them again. I had this patient who lost a family member in the last year, and she kept referring to her grieving process like it was an object. I'm trying to get a handle on it. Just when I think like I've got it, it slips away again and I lose control. And grief isn't something to control or manage. It's just something to feel and go through. And that's something I actually really like to help people do, is to be able to adapt positively, as hard as that may sound, to life without the thing or the person. The same summer that my dad passed away, which was 2022, I was listening to a podcast, the Ologies podcast, hosted by Ali Ward. And if you haven't ever heard this podcast, definitely give this a binge listen. She gets scientists on, experts in a specific field, and they talk and geek out about a specific topic. They're super interesting. That summer, I think, if I understand correctly, Ali's father passed away too. And she had a guest on twice who was a thanatologist, T-H-A-N, thanatologist, who studies death, dying, and grieving. She came on twice to lend her expert opinion and share some really beautiful stories about this whole normal part of human life and existence. One of them shared a story, and I'm going to be paraphrasing from my own interpretation. It's been a couple of years since I listened to that episode. The essence of this story stayed with me though, where they went into a grocery store and the cashier had this button, like one of those, round metal buttons that said, "Be kind to me, I'm grieving." And that type of thing just hurts my heart so hard, because if we went through the world assuming that that was true for everybody, which I assure you it is to some degree, whether they're talking about it or not, that everybody is grieving. And if we walked through the world understanding that, and frankly understanding that everybody has shit and trauma in their past that most likely they haven't properly dealt with, I think the world would be a more kind and more compassionate and more caring place. That's my hypothesis. Be kind to me, I'm grieving. You never know where someone is in their life. You never know what someone's going through. There's so much that we don't say as human beings with each other. And so I'll leave you with this summary. Very commonly, as the body is processing grief, especially if it's doing it ineffectively, there might be physical symptoms that go along with that, and that is perfectly normal. Grief is not an emotion, it's a process of adapting to life after loss. Move through the world believing that every single person you interact with is grieving something or someone, and also that they likely have unresolved trauma. And we learn to grow around our grief. And it's not that we have to put it down and control it. It's just that we have to experience it and continue on. So if you need any help with any of that, if you're stuck, if you're in any kind of stuck state, whether it's about grief or any other experience, particularly if you feel like that experience is filtering down into your physical and biochemical well-being, that's the stuff that I get super jazzed about helping people with. You can reach out at toniawinchester.com. There's a contact form chatbot in the bottom right corner. So reach out, drop us a message, and me or my assistant can get back to you and connect about whether or not what I have to offer can help. Some of the new work that I'm trained in and practicing is very effective at getting us out of these types of stuck states. Oh, there's one more thing I wanted to mention. I'm so glad that my brain wandered off a little bit. This new work that I'm starting to see clients in it's really all about helping us get new perspectives and gain new insights about how to help ourselves get unstuck from our problems in this way that's very respectful of where the person's at and does a brilliant job of helping the two hemispheres of the mind to integrate and hear each other effectively. So one of the students in this class posed this question that said, well, what about grief? How does this work that we're doing apply to grief? And beautifully and assertively and thankfully, the instructor just came back and said, is grief a problem that we need to fix? And my instinct was, of course not. Of course not. It's not something that we need to fix. It's just something that we need to move alongside with in this life, as we've been talking about in this episode. And it's really not even that we move through it. We just move with it and this adaptation process that happens. Now, of course, there's times when people do get quite stuck in grief. That can exist, and that can turn into long bouts of depression, physically, emotionally, mentally. It can turn into lack of motivation. It can turn into anxiety and even intense emotional experiences like suicidal ideation. That can all exist too. And definitely in those instances, we need help. We need professional help, and possibly a lot of it over a long time. That could be an example when grief is more pathological. And often in those people, they're doing exactly what I described before. They're doing the remembering of the final moments and final days, or maybe even months if the person was sick for some time. They're stuck at the end versus letting the end be a beginning place or a continuing on place for moving with and alongside. Okay, so my friend, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for having an open heart to some of these ideas. Maybe some of them are new, maybe some are well understood already by you. And either way, I'm just glad you're here getting curious about yourself and your health and your life and how to move in it. Until next time, may you choose to make all of your dreams come true. Hey, thanks for wondering with me today. If you've got something good out of this, then please forward this episode along to the people who you know could benefit. Be sure to subscribe, and if you're really keen, you leaving us a rating and review helps us to help more people, so thank you in advance for that. If you're wanting more insights about how you can leverage the power of your unconscious mind to go back into healing mode, head on over to toniawinchester.com, where you'll find my book, Breakthrough the Insomnia Cycle, and other helpful ideas. Thanks again, and we'll connect on the next episode of the Wonder With Me podcast. In the meantime, may you choose to make all of your dreams come true.